The tech world has actually been a leader in a lot of different kinds of diversity, and has much more to do, in terms of lots of different kinds of diversity and inclusion.
So we are enforcing the businesses to have diversity and beyond courses.
What I think has happened now, that there's been even more of an emphasis, right, on the empathy component, the vulnerability component, the transparency, being candid, bringing, it's a different definition of bringing your whole self to work. I mean, we are now inviting each other into our homes, right, into our families.
Now more than ever, you need technology you can rely on.
頼れる人ですよね。I'm a Dell Technologies advisor.
Ich auch.
我也是。
我aussi.
And if you're a small business, we're with you.
We are with you.
Estamos com você.
We want to help.
So we'll be right here.
At home, answering your calls, providing support,
And standing by you every step of the way.
Bye-bye.
My name is Tina Shaw-Pikeday, and I lead the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Practice at Russell Reynolds Associates, which is a global executive search and leadership advisory firm. And as TiE partners with the Asian diaspora, we're really delighted to have just a wonderful panel with us here today. And I'm pleased to introduce our moderator for this session, Rajani Shailender, who will act as moderator again. Rajani Shailender is the Vice President of Sales at Tech Mahindra, and an IT services, which is an IT services company specializing in digital transformation, consulting, and business process reengineering. She focuses on high-tech markets in the US, a transformational, people-oriented, and results-oriented leader. She has experience across the US, Europe, and Asia. And she has extensive experience in solutions-based consultative sales and operations, spanning the breadth of engineering, IT, business process reengineering, and infrastructure services. In her career spanning over 2 decades, she has created several successful partnerships, opened new markets, and accelerated business growth at various companies. And she firmly believes that the foundation of a successful relationship is built on achievement of mutual goals. And I can attest to that personally, as she has been my co-chair for this track, and we've been in the trenches working together to really bring together this programming. And I'll hand it over to you, Rajni, for introducing the panel.
Thank you so much, Tina, for that very, very generous introduction. It's been a pleasure working with you as a co-chair. And I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to our panel discussion on diversity, inclusion, and innovation. I have with me an amazing lineup of strong, successful, and inspiring women, and it's my privilege today to introduce them to you. First up, we have Usha Bodapu, who's the CEO and founder of eSolvit Inc. Usha is a serial entrepreneur with over 23 years of experience in the tech industry. She's the winner of numerous tech and entrepreneurship awards and has played a prominent role in Austin's tech community. She serves on multiple advisory boards, and this is the part I love. She considers it her personal and professional mission to mentor technical professionals while engaging in job creation and giving back to the society. It's an honor to have you with us, Usha.
Thank you, Rajani. Thank you, Tina.
Next, we have Shinder Dhillon, Vice President of Inclusion and Diversity at Fortive. Ms. Dhillon is an experienced HR professional with global experience and a strong background as a strategic business partner. She has a very impressive track record of delivering results by developing solutions that have helped clients exceed their business and people goals through collaborative relationships. She has demonstrated capabilities in various HR disciplines, leading others, consulting, transforming strategy into action, and managing complexity. A very warm welcome to you, Shinder.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome Dipti Ghosh. Dipti is a longtime community activist living in San Francisco and has recently retired after 34 years as Senior Vice President Investments in the financial services industry. She passionately believes in being part of the solution and not watching from the sidelines. I think a trait that all the women on this panel share. She has won numerous awards for her work on women's rights and LGBTQ issues, especially in the Asian American community. She is currently board co-chair of the Center for Asian American Media, a board co-chair of Horizons Foundation, and a board member at EARN. In her spare time, if she's not at the movies, she's probably looking for a mountain to ascend on her bicycle or a mountain to descend on her skis. Dipti, welcome to our panel. There you
Thank
go.
you, guys.
Yeah. And finally, a big welcome to Puja Jaspal. Puja serves as Cisco's Vice President of People and Communities, leading the talent strategy aligned to Cisco's transformation in engineering and corporate functions. Puja serves on the board of directors for Leaders Shape Inc. and was named 2016 Top 100 Women of Influence in the Bay Area. In her spare time, Puja enjoys cooking, soccer, tennis, and spending quality time with her husband and daughter. Welcome, Puja.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
There are all sorts of companies that help the world go round. We are the one that impacts them all. We are truly global and committed to the reputation we've gained through our history. We are the firm that leading companies worldwide turn to for advice on leadership issues. We are Russell Reynolds Associates.
So today, in the context of a global pandemic with far-reaching societal and economic implications, the transition to a new normal presents both challenges and opportunities for promoting diversity and fostering inclusion. Before COVID-19, the social and business imperatives for diversity and inclusion had become increasingly clear, with commitment to an investment in D&I on the rise across corporate America and around the world. Now, in light of COVID-19 and the call for racial and social justice, it is even more important for organizations and individuals to practice inclusive leadership. In the next half hour or so, we will discuss these extremely critical topics and take a look at steps that organizations must continue to take to strengthen diversity and build inclusive cultures in ways unlike ever before. So let's get started, right? My first question really is around the topic of the definition of diversity, right? COVID-19 has expanded the breadth of diversity in unexpected ways. With schools and colleges switching to remote instruction and previously available support systems shutting down, certain sections of the population, working parents, people taking care of elderly relatives, are going through incredible hardships. Add to this the dichotomy of certain work streams working from home and some necessary workers going into work. Shinder, Fortive employs both blue-collar workers as well as white-collar personnel. I'd love to get your perspective on what measures you've put in place to support your diverse employee base.
Thanks, Rajani. Yes, so just to give you a little bit about Fortive. So we are a portfolio company. So we have 20 different operating companies across the globe. And as you said, we have production workers as well as people in offices. And so with the pandemic, what we've noticed clearly, we were fortunate that we were deemed essential workers. So they are part of our operating company. So we really didn't have a choice to shut down. But what that did end up creating was people who are going into our factories. And then the whole question of safety, right, arose. Whereas there are folks, many other folks who they felt was safer, right, working from home. So one of the things that we definitely did was we put out a survey to all our employees, a very short pulse survey, because one thing we quickly realized that everybody has different needs, right? So the people who are going into our factories have a very different need, and what's important to them looks different, right? So through the survey, safety was number one issue for them, as well as, to be quite frank, as part of this discussion, hazardous pay. They felt they are now putting their lives at risk going in, and not only them, but their families, because they're now going back home. Whereas for people in our offices, their biggest issue was feeling of isolation and childcare. So very, very different. So for us, it was really about just listening to the different needs and then putting programs and initiatives in place and support to really help them with that. So for us, it was just keeping that top of mind, because I think sometimes there's a tendency to make assumptions of what we think people need.
Yeah, I love that. So one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah.
Why not just ask the question, right? What do you need?
Right.
And help them out. That's
absolutely wonderful. Yeah, because otherwise you're doing it through your own lens, right? And certain judgments as well.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Puja, Cisco is all about IoT, connecting people, data, processes, and things. In your role as head of HR, how do you tackle the connectedness aspect, given the current situation we're facing?
Thank you, Rajani, and thank you, Shinder, for your comments as well. Build on what you shared as well, which, gosh, I think that the idea of connectedness right now is just so important. And while it is part of our business, right, to connect businesses and people, I would say we brought that internally for our employees as well. One of the things that we did right when COVID started, we started a weekly meeting led by our CEO and the executive management team, where he was in front of our entire company on a weekly basis, 75,000 employees. I think we on average had 30,000 employees dial into this meeting every week. And that sort of building that connectedness, that community, online, virtual. And by the way, I think Cisco as a company had, even prior to COVID, probably has had the most sort of virtual environments, right? Just our technology has enabled us to do that. And now that we were able to put 75,000 people online in a matter of a week. So it was quite incredible. But this community and the sense of community and connectedness that we built just by a simple, let's get in front of the employee base. Let's just make sure that we all have an avenue to share and to hear from our CEO in terms of what's top of mind. What is he worried about? What are we worried about? We brought in our doctors from our medical facility that were with us every week, kind of sharing what they're hearing, answering questions from the concerns that people would dial in their questions, and we were able to answer them. So, I've got to say, those first few weeks when we all went virtual, that meeting, we realized actually led to higher engagement, right? Just people participating in that conversation. There was just a stronger sense of belonging. And to see some of our most senior leaders being vulnerable and sharing that with the community really, really helped.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I know a lot of friends who work at Cisco, and I've had firsthand feedback from them on how important that was. Just having that shared experience across the company, that you're not in this alone, we're all in it together, and we'll get through it together, rather than you're on your own, go do your thing, right? So it's beautiful. Thank you for that. Usha, your company works closely with the US government. How have you been able to achieve business continuity in this new paradigm? Because I would imagine that, there's always, when working with the government, security issues and other concerns working from home. So talk to us a little bit about how you achieved balance for your employees during this paradigm.
Yes, thank you so much, Rajani, for this question. And actually, eSolvent Inc. provides information technology services and solutions using next generation technologies to state of Texas. Especially, we have a lot of business with state of Texas and city of Austin, as well as federal government. So in the beginning of the first quarter, we have planned a big acquisition. So we acquired a new company and we are going through a merger. Everything was right in place. And we came to hear this lockdown and this national, and I think the global pandemic in the beginning of the March. So, but I think our teams have done extremely great. So we have initially started talking with all the government agencies to make sure to give the permission to work from home for all of our employees that are doing customizations at government. That's one thing. And then they've been very, very, very wonderful, amazing clients, because government industries, especially on security aspects, they don't like that too. But it's because of this national pandemic, everybody took a pivot. And focused on helping each other. So they have immediately have given us, like, shipped us the VPN infrastructure with loaded software, and then our teams have coordinated to ship it to our employees who are everywhere in the North America. That was one wonderful. And then being in technology and kind of using so much technology, our teams have been kind of used to working remote things, and we have operations across in India too. So we've been communicating over, like, remotely using LogMeIn and all this VPN access. So we kind of used to, and increasing more efficiency using infrastructure, we created a lot of relationships among the employees, and that actually has increased operational efficiency and productivity, and kind of we started fostering the team building relationships.
So I hear a common thread among all your answers, right? Which is connecting with the people, listening to what people want, and which is a perfect segue to the next topic that I wanted to touch upon, which was, let's look at the emotional impact of COVID-19, right? With shelter in place and social distancing directives, people are feeling isolated and lonely. So Dipti, I'm going to turn the lens on you a little bit here. You've been hit by a double whammy. Right? You recently retired after over 3 decades of corporate life. And then COVID-19 has put a kibosh on your social interactions. Tell us how this has impacted you and what steps you wish companies would put in place to help people in your position.
So, retiring in COVID-19 is like graduating in COVID-19. Nobody cares. Okay. So I've retired and felt like nothing really changed, except I don't see anybody. We're really avid travelers, like lots of people, and it just is really uncomfortable not being able to think of where you want to go and go there. So it's been really difficult. But I wanted to get set back a little bit and just talk a little bit about how nonprofits have been affected by COVID-19. And since I sit on the board of a small, well, actually it's the largest LGBT community foundation, but in comparison to many foundations, it's pretty small. But, we were hit with this situation where a lot of LGBTQ organizations are really on the margins in terms of their own funding. There's, if you look at the percentage of foundation grants that come to LGBTQ communities from corporate America, it's actually a really small percentage, much smaller than what you would think the population that they serve. So we had to sort of, be the leadership in that and start raising money just for COVID-19 and giving out extra grants just to help through COVID-19. And I have to say, people were really generous. We didn't want to go out and say we want to raise money because everybody's like getting laid off, and who are you going to get this money from? But corporations stepped up. People, unsolicited, sent us money to put out, and in the end, we were able to give out. It doesn't look like a big amount, but to nonprofit organizations, it's huge. We gave out $1 million in just COVID-19 funds, and which really was an amazing situation. But anyway, so I just wanted to add that little piece in because
I appreciate it, because it's, we're really trying to see how this has impacted the entire diaspora, right? We're looking at, nonprofits, we're looking at entrepreneurs or small businesses, we're looking at large, multinational global corporations. And I think it's had an impact across the entire spectrum. So very valuable perspective. Thank you so much.
In another organization where we've been trying to get a lot of corporate sponsorship, because it's actually like a bit of it's a financial, it's not called Earn anymore, actually it's called Save Our Life, but it's a fintech organization that helps low-income people with financial education. And, we figured out the best partners are banks, because banks don't really serve that population very well. And we found, we'd get some banks would be very generous and others we couldn't even get a meeting with. Right. I just want to tell you, millions came in during COVID because they had no capacity to help those folks. So there has been a good thing come out of it for folks, but it's, hopefully it continues and doesn't stop once we get out of COVID and we still need funds.
That's inspirational. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Dipti. Shinder, we were talking about this when you and I connected a couple of days ago. As if COVID-19 was not enough, our nation has also been rocked by social and racial issues that have left people feeling a range of emotions, right? I'm still staying on the emotion topic, from shock to anger to sorrow. And it's especially important today for managers to lean to the empathetic and vulnerable side of leadership to be more inclusive. You shared with me some measures that you've put in place to support managers deal with COVID and race issues. I think the audience would love to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are definitely in very interesting times, right? I think there's no other way to put it, on so many different levels. Who would have thought we would be here where we are today? And so but there is a silver lining in all of this. I think, so one of the things is, and I think, Puja touched on it a little bit, in just where leaders are. So one part is the role of leaders. So I think there's always been certain attributes that are always important for what great leaders look like, right? From an attributes and competency perspective. But what I think has happened now, that there's been even more of an emphasis, right, on the empathy component, the vulnerability component, the transparency, being candid, bringing, it's a different definition of bringing your whole self to work. We are now inviting each other into our homes, right, into our families. So that's never happened before. And there's topics that were taboo before, right, like politics, race, mental health and wellness, that's coming in. And so for us, I think, what the measure has been is, about 2 years ago, we created, so I have been with the organization for 2 years. It's, my role is brand new to the organization. And so we put a strategy in place, and we put, part of it is our 3 strategic pillars. First one is I&D matters. And that's really about the whole talent management component, right? Recruiting, retention, development, the business case. The second pillar is everyone owns inclusion, right? And that's really what I think has got us through this in so many different ways and has emphasized it even more. And what that is that every single person who works for the company has a sense of responsibility to really create the environment that we want to see and feel and belong to. And then our last one is I&D in our DNA. That's really about our processes and our systems. So how do we really go about breaking some of the barriers that are in our system? So when we do, an easy one, right? When we do recruiting, what are the things we can put in place to really tackle those unconscious bias? Having blind resumes, so you don't see the person's name. So you're not making judgments based on that. Making sure you have gender neutral language in your job postings. As research shows us that women feel that they've got to have the majority of what's required before they even apply, right? So they self-select out. So so that's examples of how breaking those down in performance reviews, right? How we do assessments. So that's really what our last pillar is about. And then what we look at it, we break it down by, leaders, managers, and employees. What are the different things and initiatives that we have to put in place to really help those individuals? But I think ultimately at the end of the day, it is really about the individual And we all, because in my career, I've been in, organizations where everybody points the finger at everybody else, right? Oh, my manager will deal with it, or the leader will deal with it, or it's the CEO's responsibility, or HR, or the I&D team. But it's also to say, you know what, you also play a role. Mm-hmm. Don't be a bystander, right? You've got to speak up. You've got to have the courage.
Right.
That's really what we're pushing, is that we all, yes, we have different levels of responsibility because of your position and your seniority. But just imagine if every single person did something, that would, start to shift the change, the sustainable change that we would need.
No, absolutely. I hear you. And sometimes, when I'm thinking about diversity and inclusion, it surprises me because, we kind of have these little boxes, right? Race, gender, age, sexual orientation, ability, different boxes. But if you really think about it, every single one of us is a unique individual. So really, we should have, 8 billion boxes, right? If you think we're a diverse planet, and for us to, pretend that people conform to certain characteristics because they are, they fall in a box, just is a flawed concept. So I love your phrase about inclusion is everyone's responsibility. It's beautiful. Thank you. All right, so let's so moving on. I really wanted to talk a little bit about inclusion and innovation, right, and the impact of diversity and inclusion on innovation. So we're familiar with the quote, "Diversity is having a seat at the table," and we know that a lot of companies actually almost use that as a checkbox, right? But inclusion is really having a voice at that table, right? Actually having your voice heard. Puja, you worked for companies that are known for their innovation, right? You talk about Google, you talk about Visa, you talk about, companies that you've worked with. In your experience, how does diversity impact innovation in the corporate world?
Yeah, thank you, Rajani. Gosh, I think, my belief is in order for companies to innovate and to see around the corners, right, to really think ahead, to do things they haven't done before, it requires a different mindset. It requires, it requires different thinking. And if you have a homogeneous set of people, it's just not going to happen, right? It's just not going to happen. A ton of research shows that as well. But I just think, and I would say even now in the global pandemic, it is such an imperative. It's not even an option to be inclusive. Right? It's not an option because we're all so isolated. Inclusion is like a foundation. It's, every single person having a voice is so important right now, more than ever. And my hope is that this crisis is going to help, kind of catapult us into, really making that stick. And so I think that there's a piece around diversity and representation. I think Sherry talked a lot about this probably in the previous session, but the piece on inclusion and people and everybody having a voice is paramount. It's so important. And in those dialogues and discussions where, some voices aren't being heard or too quiet, it's more and more, it's so important for us as leaders to just call that out. Say, hey, I need to know what you think. Rajani, you've been a little quiet in this meeting. What do you think?
Yeah,
But
I hear you.
Yeah, exactly. It's okay. We got to go. Let's go around the table and hear what everybody thinks. Rajani, you start, right? Like, let's hear from some of the quieter voices. And sometimes the best ideas are there, but they're just not tapped on, right? And the loudest voices take over. Okay. And so this notion of one having a voice and being really tuned in to everybody's voice is so key. Right now, especially, I would say just in general, for companies to innovate, that best idea, the thinking is probably there, buried in the organization somewhere. Yeah. And how do you kind of get rid of those barriers that enable those best ideas to flow up and down the organization? And that's what I would say, I definitely think Google, that was one of the core principles of the culture at Google. I think Visa, we were working through a transformation to get there, right? And many years of, hierarchy and sort of a different culture that wanted to be more technology focused. And now at Cisco, it's sort of getting back to the roots of Cisco's brand and culture. I think it's definitely, with the help of Sherry and others at Cisco, I think there's been a ton of progress, but a lot more that we need to do. So we cannot rest on our laurels.
You mentioned something the other day when we were talking about Cisco. You said that there's a meeting coming up with a business unit, but the number one item on that agenda was inclusion and diversity, which I thought was amazing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, one of the shifts that we need to make in our business at Cisco is, we're known to be a routing and switching company, right? And it's like, no, well, those are components. Customers are not buying parts and pieces anymore. They're looking for a full solution. They're looking for a cloud-based solution. So we're making shifts in our business. The meeting next week is an offsite with the enterprise networking and cloud business. And the number one agenda item, as I mentioned to you, Rajani, is inclusion, because that sort of underpins everything that we're going to do. And for us to make those big shifts in our business, we're not going to do it unless we're role modeling and we're multiplying conscious culture. We're multiplying inclusion. We're just not going to get there if we don't have that lens. Yeah.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Rajani, this is Shinder saying one thing I would add to what Puja is saying about the whole inclusion component. I mean, that is just so key, which is why, we ended up switching it and calling it inclusion and diversity.
Right, I noted that.
Because of that, it is because it's and my talent acquisition peers hate me saying this, but the recruitment component is relatively easier, right?
Yeah.
But if folks come in and it's not a welcoming culture and it's not an inclusive environment, they don't have a sense of belonging, they're going to leave, right? So you're creating that revolving door.
Right.
And for us, it was very much flipping it, that we really have to focus on this part, and it is so important to get that right.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shinder. That's a good point. Usha, I wanted to turn to you a little bit. You're a female tech company founder and CEO. I bet diversity and inclusion is very close to your heart. Your company has won numerous awards, including Fast 100 Companies of the Year. And when you and I were talking, I could hear how proud you were of your leadership team, which is a very diverse set of folks. So talk to us a little bit about how your D&I initiatives have played a part in your phenomenal success.
Thank you, Rajani, and it was amazing to hear from Puja and Shinder. So awesome. Actually, diversity and inclusion is one of the main values in eSolvit Inc., along to that social responsibility. So I'm a USA Emerging Leaders Certified, so I have to do my whole entire business plan, including my values. So I have done everything with my own handwriting, so it went so deep into me. So we are a Pledge 1% company, and we support 25 nonprofits, and 1% of all of our employees, their time, and 1% of the profits we put it into a fund, and we support so many nonprofits. And as part of that, I have been serving in several boards as being a voice, City of Austin Advisory Board. It's a special commission that I have been serving, which is Minority, Women-Owned and Small Business Procurement Commission. So when I started understanding the logistics, how this business is supporting all the local city businesses to give equal priority to women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and are these bigger projects have been divided into smaller parts, and are we actually giving opportunities to local businesses? So I'm a voice, I'm taking the voice that this is not happening and bigger projects are not being divided, and the opportunities are not being given. I took it to the commission where I report to, and they've been pretty good in listening and then putting into a disparity study, and they have selected me to be a part of the disparity study. And serving on the Asian Chamber of Board of Directors, we are doing enforcing to bring in this, what Shinder and Puja was talking is exactly like we need to bring in the culture. So we are enforcing the businesses to have diversity and beyond courses. Especially I myself have done diversity and beyond course as part of Austin Leadership. It's a 2-day intensive course where we have all the communities, all the ethnicities sitting in a chair and talking, understanding what are the deep problems they have, what makes them, so we can remove these bias, understand them better. So when I'm incorporating those kind of as part of corporate.
You know, what you say really actually is answering one of the questions. I was looking at some of the audience questions while you were talking. And one of the questions was how, you know, diversity and inclusion needs to be led from the top.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I see that in what you're saying. So thank you, Usha. And, you know, hopefully as we continue this dialogue, because it's such an important topic, you know, and we'll see more and more leaders really embrace this into their philosophies and you know, pivot companies in the right direction. It pains me that, you know, that we're still talking about diversity and inclusion today, when it's almost like a no-brainer, right? But I guess these conversations are so important. We got to keep doing it because, you know, one of the things that that I heard in our keynote session by Indra was where she was talking about 2.3%. Funding goes to women, you know, founders of startups in the Valley, which was a mind-boggling number, right? I mean, it's like really, I didn't realize it was such a small number. So I guess we need to continue this conversation. So thank you for that. We have a ton of questions and we're running out of time, but I wanted to turn to Dipti with this one. You know, so I'm reminded of a motivational poster at my daughter's high school locker room. It was a picture of a swimming pool and had a caption which read, age, gender, race, religion, political belief, or background. The water treats you the same, right? How I wish this were true for our workplaces as well. Dipti, as a queer Indian woman, you have always been an ardent and outspoken...
An older Indian woman. I got a lot of boxes I check.
I mean, but a gorgeous and, you know, well-spoken and charismatic. Let's add those boxes as well. You've always been an ardent and outspoken champion for diversity. Can you share your thoughts on intersectionality and its impact on diversity and inclusion?
Well, I think part of it for me, you know, being in, you know, you all come from the tech world, where I think the tech world has actually been a leader in a lot of different kinds of diversity, and has much more to do, you know, in terms of lots of different kinds of diversity and inclusion. But, you know, I come from the banking world. So that's like a bastion of old white men. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's a lot different trying to get things changed over there. And I think that there are people who want to try to be, you know, like the water treats you all the same. But the truth is, there's just this hiring people and bringing people in and putting them into a situation which has not changed in 100 years. You're going to have that revolving door. And it's really, you know, it's quite profuse in banking. And, you know, especially on the side that deals with clients, right? I'm an investment advisor, so I bring in the business. And when I look at my client base, it's 80% women and mostly brown women. And I wonder why. And none of my clients, you know, and my colleagues look around and, you know, they don't have that client base. They have a bunch of old white men who look like them. So I think that understanding that you're diverse, the more diverse your workforce is, attracts more diverse people, it attracts more voices. But within that diversity, I think one has to figure out, how do you make it inclusive? Is not just hiring people. Inclusive is changing the way you do things and how you actually interact with folks. So I don't know how you do that, But I feel like that's what happens is you come into this very male-dominated world, or a very straight world, or a very white world, and you feel like you just got dropped in the middle of the ocean and you were not given a boat or a paddle. So I think that's we think that that's the thing, but I think that intersectionality is like this ideal world that we don't have yet. And we've got to work on getting there. And we've made lots of strides, but there's plenty more strides to be made. And, and bringing everybody along, that's the part, that's the challenging part. And that's the hard part. And, we're a bunch of brown women sitting here, and we know we all come to our work with biases of all sorts of different ones. And, so I think that having more people that check more boxes is always good. And I think that helps, and I think that we have to speak up about it, and that's what, and find the way to mentor people, to bring people into those situations. And one of the things I think I was sharing with you was I've always mentored folks in my work. None of them ended up being in the investment world, but they all ended up doing things that I was very proud that they were doing. But what happened was that I brought them into a situation where they didn't have any, these were all, and I always decided to get folks that were more, let's say, didn't have any access. We all know it's who you know and how you know them. And, you send a friend who's you want to work at Google, you find somebody who works at Google who's a friend of yours and say, hey, can you put a referral in for me? You do the same thing at the bank, right? You do the same thing. But there's a huge group of folks that we're trying to reach that didn't go to Harvard and didn't get at the top of the class, but they're super smart people and they're super bright, or I think I gave you the example of somebody at my work whose parents were housekeepers. He was a Stanford graduate working as an assistant for an advisor.
Right.
And I looked at him and I said, what are you doing this job for? I mean, I have a degree from USF, and he's like, he didn't know anybody. Like, his job was the best job that he could find on his own, and today he's doing very well for himself. But, it was someone asking him, like, why are you being somebody's assistant when you should be an advisor, And so I just think that we have to be just much more conscious of people who are different from us and how we include them. And I think, Shinder and Puja are doing like this amazing work at such a broad level. And the only hope I have is that it filters down to where everybody's making those decisions.
Right. Thank you, Dipti. I don't know how the time just flew. We're at the end of our allotted time, and I had so many more things that I wanted to talk to you about. Wanted to talk about mentorship and sponsorship and the importance of that, and how we make sure that goes across the board. There was some wonderful questions that came up from the audience around during the pandemic, women are having to juggle work and home responsibilities. Consequently, they're slowly leaving the workforce. How do we address that? How do we help, women kind of stay in the workforce and support them? I mean, there's a whole bunch of questions. What I'm going to do is actually bring all of you back on another panel, and we'll have another conversation about a bunch of different things. We do have to wrap up, but here's what we can do. If we can just do a quick 30 seconds round robin. One of the things that one of the sayings that I really love is that something good comes out of every crisis, right? So from a D&I perspective, because I'm sure if we remove the D&I label, we can think of a million things that we'd like to see come out of this crisis. But specifically from the D&I perspective, what good would you personally like to see coming out of the current crisis that we find ourselves in? Shinder, why don't we go with you first?
Sure. So for me, it's going to be, it's that famous saying by Gandhi about be the change you want to see, in the world. And it's the courage. It takes courage to be the voice, ask the questions, and there's the fear, right? It's the fear that always holds us back. So for me, and personally, what I've been trying to do is really have that courage to lean in and be uncomfortable, because that's how change is really going to happen.
Beautiful. Thank you, Shinder. Usha, how about you?
This is one of the quote which I have given in Profiles in Power Award ceremony. Like, failure is not an option. Failure is not an option when you seek right mentors at the right time. And then I think this is the time we all have to collaborate. Bigger companies have to give opportunities to small businesses and help each other, and then get to it with thinking a different mindset to take a shift in a year course to change your business model, and you can always come back to your passionate business. So
pivot is your, okay, wonderful. Thank you. Puja.
I think we have such an amazing opportunity right now to bring that sense of closeness in relationships. I think that the teams and companies and cultures that foster and make sure that that's, a core part of how we survive this and thrive in this pandemic are going to come out stronger. They're going to have that sense of loyalty and camaraderie, like, gosh, we did this together. And so that feeling of togetherness, like, hey, we're a team, we're fighting something together, is really important. And I think will yield, something really exciting coming out of this crisis.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Dipti, over to you. Dipti, you're on mute. We love technology, right? Gotta love technology.
Yeah, and I'm so untechnical here. I'm going to steal something from you. When you see something, have the courage to say something. And that for me has been my motto throughout my life. I grew up with parents who did that, and they taught me how to do that. And so it hasn't always served me well, but in the end, I don't regret anything that I've done to change something wherever I am, whether it's at a nonprofit board, or if it's in a nonprofit organization, or if it's where I work. And I've done things that would not have been. I've helped young people get the right legal advice when they were being taken advantage of, or work at the level that I could make change, and speak up when I could. I didn't have the power to change a whole bank, but I definitely felt like I changed my environment based on that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So, while all of you were talking, and forgive me because I'm a huge Avengers fan, and, that's something that I love doing and watching. And I was thinking, gosh, you all need capes, because we have this set of super women on this panel. So I, really appreciate you being here. The other thing that I wanted to point out was, we've been talking about diversity for the last 40 minutes or so. And if we look at the panel today, between the five of us, we have a head of inclusion and diversity. Shinder, I put inclusion first. Human resources head, a CEO, a board member, and a business unit head, right? 5 completely diverse streams of focus. Yet, all of us have been united in our conviction that in diversity, there is beauty and there is strength. So on that note, I'd like to kind of leave you all, but I do have a parting request, not just for the women on the panel, but everybody who's listening in. Please keep this dialogue going. This is an extremely important dialogue. It affects every one of us individually. As Shinder said, inclusion is every individual's responsibility. And Shinder, I'm also a big fan of, some of the things that Mahatma Gandhi said. He said, our ability to reach unity in diversity will be the beauty and the test of our civilization. So let's be the change that we want to see in this world. Thank you once again, ladies. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Time flew in, and it was, you know what? I'm getting a note right now from Tina. It looks like we have a couple more minutes because our next panelist is running a few minutes late. So I'm going to hold on to you if that's okay with you for a few more minutes. We have a number of questions from the audience. So why don't we kind of address some of those? Is that okay? Yes.
Rajani, I have brought in the statistics, especially as part of 2020 National Business Owners.
Okay.
Important statistics, especially if I have the privilege.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is the 2020 statistics from National Association of Women Business Owners. I've been the fortunate woman to win this award in 2020. As part of that, I've got this. So there are 12.8 women-owned businesses. 12.3 million women-owned businesses that generate $1.9 trillion in sales and employ over 9.4 million people. And Texas is #1 in the nation in the number of women-owned businesses, registered over 991,000 women-owned businesses. And to that to add, federal government has made it mandatory in giving the workforce to be around, let me see, around a number of 36.4% federal workforce. Out of that, 18.4 workforce is African American, 8.6% is Hispanic, 5.8% is Asian American, and 0.5 is Native Hawaiian, and 1.6 is Native Americans.
Fantastic. So that's fantastic statistics. Thank you so much, Usha. And I think we'll kind of end on that optimistic note. I love those numbers. They were wonderful, and there's hope for us yet. I mean, let's keep doing the good work that we're all doing. Let's continue having these conversations, and hopefully one of these days we'll stop talking about diversity and inclusion because it's going to become a part of our daily lives. Yeah.